This is Ryan Turner, Artistic Director of Emmanuel Music, and I'm thrilled to be here with baritone Elliott Heinz. Elliott was another member of our inaugural Bach Institute in January of 2011. He's now living in Stuttgart, and we're thrilled to have him here on Zoom. Elliott, great to see you.
It's great to see y'all. I'm very happy to see and be here and be reconnected with Emmanuel.
It's good to see you, and I love that you said y'all. Elliott is a fellow Texan like myself. Uh, so tell us, Elliot, what have you been up to since the Bach Institute all that 10 years ago?
Oh, it was 10 years ago, Jesus. Um, so I guess that was my junior year of Oberlin when I was doing my undergraduate at Oberlin. After that, I went and did my master's at Juilliard. And then after I graduated my master's, I kind of did a year freelancing, um, going back home
Mhm.
to Houston. And about 6 months into my time going back home to Houston, I got an offer to join the Young Artist Program at the Landestheater in Salzburg, so the state theater there. So in July of 2015, I moved to Salzburg and was in the Young Artist Program for 2 years there at Salzburg and Landestheater. And then they took me as a member of the ensemble and became Fest for a season. And Salzburg is very pretty, but I wanted to live someplace a bit bigger than Salzburg and kind of go to a bigger house. And so I applied to do one more Young Artist Program in Stuttgart. So I joined the Young Artist Program in Stuttgart. They were kind enough to take me. And now I am just working here in Stuttgart. I did that for 2 years. And then Corona happened, as we're all
Mm.
experiencing, but they've been wonderful. And we're very fortunate that Stuttgart has done a lot of work and I've gotten to do a lot of guest work here. So I just did my first Papageno here. We did L'Enfant et le Sortilège for no people. And now we're just kind of sitting around and waiting to see what comes next. And yeah, there's been lots of other things in between there, but that's been the major
Mhm.
things that have been in my life.
So, that brief 3 week period 10 years ago here in Boston with the Bach Institute, with our
Yep.
dear Kendra and Peggy, especially, how has that experience sort of filtered into your musical life moving forward? And what sort of, I don't want to say lessons learned, but what experiences have you taken forward that has informed the rest of your career?
I I don't think I would have pursued singing as a soloist if I hadn't done the Bach Institute. I think it was really a shift because while I was at Oberlin, a lot of my time was kind of split between whether I wanted to be a choir director or be a singer. I was really, really focused on choral music. And I hadn't really found my, I guess, solo voice as a singer. And once I found Bach, it was like, oh, this. I will sing for this. I love this. Um, and if I hadn't had those 3 weeks at Emmanuel, I first of all don't think I would have had such a love for Bach because it is still my favorite thing in the world to sing and listen to. And it shifted my whole thinking about what I wanted to do. Um, and everywhere I go, I've tried to search out Bach. What is difficult, I have to say, about the Bach Institute is that y'all do it so well, and I have to say, shame on me. I love the modern instruments. I love the playing on the modern instruments, and I love that people sing. Like they sing the music at Emmanuel, and it's incredible. And you find that so rarely. Um, and it gives me it I haven't found something like that since. Um, which maybe I can create something here, but it was really special. I was fortunate to go to Oregon Bach Festival for 3 summers or so with Helmut Rilling, and that was really wonderful. Um, but Emmanuel really just the way you guys do Bach and with such integrity and with real playing and real singing is just really spectacular, I find.
Well, thank you. That's great to hear. I do think that often at Emmanuel we have a slightly different approach than many do, and I think the point of it is coming from the text and the
Right.
struggle with the human condition, and that because of that, we're real people singing with real emotion that
Yeah.
cannot be sort of edited down to something that is stylistic when it's honest. So,
That's you said it exactly right. Like you can't put special effects and doohickeys on just honesty and directness, because the truth speaks louder than anything. And a message speaks louder than anything than trying to go it's just if you just do it and sing it well with meaning, conviction, and technically well, you'll get it all.
it's amazing to me that your takeaway from the Bach Institute was turned you to wanting to do solo singing. I think so often Bach, given the challenges of singing Bach for a singer, I often use the example that singing Handel is like having a really good voice lesson, and singing Bach is having a really bad voice lesson. Uh, and so I'm really heartened by the fact that singing Bach is what inspired you to have a solo career in singing, which strikes me that probably everything after Bach seems easy, comparatively speaking.
Well, I mean, there's some things that are comparable. This Ravel was kind of hard, I have to say, screaming. But I no, I mean, it is the hardest thing to do. It's the hardest thing to do in that honest way, and to
Mhm.
actually sing it well, because I think there's a way you can kind of fake it or get around it.
Mm.
I think you hear a lot of times people kind of going off their voice or doing something that is not completely on your body. But if you actually have to sing Bach well, that is the hardest thing in the world. And you can't cheat. Like,
That's right.
there's no cheating involved, I think, if you do it well. The other thing I think that inspired me so much, which I learned at Emmanuel, was about Lorraine Hunt Leverson, who I did
Mm.
not know before I went to Emmanuel. And then there was, I think my host family said to check out this recording. And it was the first time I had heard Bach like that, and heard the Emmanuel group play Bach like that. And I thought, oh my God, there are no one is cutting corners in this. Like, the phrases are done with such intent and are so long. I think these are the fingers that Peggy and Kendra used on us for
Yes.
for our phrases. Keep going, keep going, don't stop. So, I think I heard that in those recordings too. So I just I wish more people would trust that and be open to that, because when you accept that, then you realize how deep it goes. And maybe sometimes people are afraid of that
Mm.
type of incredibly direct, vulnerable type of music making. But I think the benefits of it are just so much deeper than getting something that is surface level and just style for the sake of I saw it in a book.
Indeed. You mentioned vulnerable, and that's a great segue to you've given us two recordings to share with our audience. And the first is this German Advent carol, which I was tangentially aware of. And I'm curious for you to set up this carol because I found the arrangement and your performance to be hauntingly beautiful. And what you, in your performance, gave us was your vulnerability, which I think is a real gift. So, can you set that up for us and
Oh,
tell us a bit about it?
thanks. Yeah, the carol, yeah, it's called Maria durch ein Dornwald ging. Maria went through the fields of the woods of thorns, the thorn bush. Um, and I learned about it, I guess, 2.5 years ago when I moved here, and every year I get a group of people together to go sing at the hospice here in Stuttgart. And one of the women who has sung in the opera house here for 20 odd years said, "You should know this Christmas carol." And I found it on YouTube and I said, "Why have I never heard this song?" And to hear this song that is a lot about Maria's story with the baby Jesus, and to sing a song like that to people who have dying children in their arms, like you start to get a picture of the vulnerable state those parents are in. And it just doesn't leave you. So the song has a very strong relationship to many people at this opera house. Actually, the opera house in Stuttgart, we feel very strongly about it because we chose to sing it there at the children's hospice as well. You know, because sometimes these Christmas carols don't feel, what's the word I'm looking for? Like they're in the here and now, like they are relevant to us. I think anybody can relate to pain and having a child that you don't want to be in pain. And so I think just to be able to share that with people who know exactly what that pain is at this time was just really special for all of us who got to sing it at the hospice.
Thanks, Elliott. So this is Maria durch sein Dornwald ging, and at the other side of this, Elliott will come back on and tell us a little bit about this brief Bach that he has for us. Elliot, that was absolutely gorgeous and hauntingly beautiful. Thank you so much. Now, we asked you to share some Bach with us, and uh, of course, I was expecting you to, to give us, I don't know, Ich habe genug or Machadiek or some one of the great Bach arias from the Passions, but instead you shared with us a wonderfully intimate and heartfelt. It's like a little ditty of Bach, so a side of Bach we don't hear with you and a friend playing the guitar. Can you tell us about this brief excerpt that you gave us?
Yeah. So actually, this was this past September. Um, I took over the Chamber Music Festival in Nuremberg as curator for a season. So we created the whole program, made the whole festival, and had to make 10,000, of course, different changes due to Corona. And luckily, we were able to still do it because in September things were pretty good in Bavaria. And one of our concerts was in one of the halls at the cemetery, the St. Johannes Cemetery in Nuremberg, in their Aussegungshalle, which is where they kind of have the services for people that they're about to bury. And it was all very small forces for this concert. And it was a very late night concert. So we had already done a giant concert right before. And then this was at about 1 in the morning um, in a cemetery. I mean, but
Wow.
it was a really cool atmosphere. And I love the text of this hymn, of Der Tag ist hin, because it just kind of says, we've been through the day, it's gone, and you get to try again tomorrow. So I wanted to leave the audience with that before they all went to sleep.
Uh, what a great sentiment in this difficult time. We get to try again tomorrow.
Yes, yes, we
Great,
do.
Elliot. Thanks so much. It's great to talk to you and great to follow your career from afar. Congratulations on all your myriad of successes, and please stay in touch with us. And I hope that when the world is normal again and we can all travel, that you'll come sing with us at Emmanuel at some point.
I would kill, and I'm taking you up on that offer.
You
I
got
would love to
it.
sing at Emmanuel again, and thanks for having me. And let me just talk to y'all, and I hope to see you all really soon.
Thanks again, Elliot. So we'll say goodbye with him singing a Bach song, Der Tag ist hin, die Sonne geht nieder. Thanks again, Elliot Heinz, and take care.
Thank
Bye bye.
you. Bye.
Schönen Abend noch.
Turner. I'm the artistic director of Emmanuel Music. That was Sarah Freiberg playing the first of the Bach cello suites. For 50 years, Emmanuel Music has performed Bach on modern instruments. We are firmly committed to the idea that Bach is the domain of all musicians, not just those of period practice. And yet at the same time, the idea of performance practice is constantly part of our conversation. This evening, as part of our Bach Institute, we have with us our concertmaster Heidi Braun-Hill, cellist Sarah Freiberg, and the other Sarah, violist Sarah Darling, to have a discussion about the challenges and the rewards of playing Bach on modern instruments. Welcome to all three of you. It's great to have you here. I'd like to start just by each of you introducing yourselves and telling us a little bit about your time at Emmanuel Music, your relationship with Bach, and your instrumental background. Heidi, why don't you start us off?
So I came to Emmanuel in end of 1998, which I think was around the same time that you did, and was so inspired to join the ensemble, inspired by Craig Smith and his idea of just as you just said, that we all have access to this. We all get to do it. And so I've been here since then, enjoying so many different iterations and you know, Emmanuel's so flexible, and it has changed in subtle ways, you know, throughout every year, but that's because of the community, and I think a lot of it is that we're all learning from each other. So anyway, I guess we'll get to that, right? And so I've been exclusively a modern player all along, and that's, I think, pretty much it. Did that answer all the questions?
Sure, yeah. Sarah Darling.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. Let's see. Gosh. My relationship with Emmanuel, I would say, started way before I joined the orchestra. I grew up outside of Boston in Carlisle. And so, you know, with music in the family, you sort of hear rumblings about this magical city called Boston. And, and this church that does this crazy, wonderful thing where every Sunday, you know, you play a cantata the way that Bach intended. And so I always just thought that was the coolest thing in the world. And fast forward quite a while, I grew up playing, well, I started on modern violin. At a certain point, my heart led me very definitely to the viola. So that was kind of a change in direction that I was really happy about. And sometime after that, my heart sort of expanded a little bit and said, why don't you also see if Baroque violin might be something you're interested in? I said, okay, Heart, well, you know, we'll give it a shot. And just discovered that it was really fun for me to sort of navigate these different worlds, but strangely enough, I never returned to the modern violin. So I'm kind of hanging out everywhere else. When I joined Emmanuel, the orchestra, it was after Craig Smith. I actually never had the chance to meet him. So I sometimes feel like I'm here communing with a ghost. But of course there are ghosts, and then there are real life presences, and here we are continuing on.
Thank you. Sarah Freiberg.
Well, I also grew up in the Boston area. I grew up in Belmont. And then when I went to college, I left for 20 years. And when I returned, after spending time, a decade or so on the West Coast, mostly playing Baroque cello up and down the West Coast, from LA to Vancouver. And when I came back here, I had 2 little kids. But I did get asked to play a couple of times with Emmanuel, and I thought that was quite nice. Just a couple of times with Craig. And then I was busy, you guys were busy, there was a lot else going on, and I may have been a little too Baroque back then. I think I've moderated as time in Boston has gone on, but I've been playing a lot more recently, and it's really, particularly this year, It has been such a joy to be able to make music together. It's been so special. So.
Thank you, Sarah. So our weekend rehearsals are brief, to say the least. Just for our listeners to know, we typically have 1 hour on Saturday to rehearse a cantata, and then about a 30-minute brush-up rehearsal on Sunday morning before we perform it in the worship service. The personnel from week to week can be varied and very, different from week to week. Seldom are you playing with the same players. So the question I have for you all is, what makes that fun? And also, what makes it challenging, given the different group of players and limited rehearsal time? Heidi, do you want to start?
Well, one of the things that makes it really fun is the repertoire,
Mm-hmm.
the cantatas. I mean, it's just the best. And something else that makes it fun for me is that we have to reach a consensus about how we're going to do it with very little talking. There's not a lot of time to discuss everything that we're going to do. And so we listen and we adjust to each other, and in the moment, like real time, and every time we play something through, it's a little different. And when we come to Sunday to playing for the church service, it's frequently even quite different than we rehearsed it. We had ironed out the nuts and bolts of all of it, but how we're coming to it is always feels very fresh to me. And as you're asking about the personnel, that changes it too. And we all put forth our ideas. I mean, we're all, opinionated. It comes up in rehearsal. We put forth our ideas, and we have to kind of adjust and compromise. And that's fun. That's cool, and without even talking about it.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to throw this question over to Sarah, and as I do this, I'm being told by our producer that your mic is underneath your scarf,
Oh,
and they're
okay.
having trouble hearing you.
Okay.
So the beauty, it's live, everybody. Sarah Freiberg, as a cellist and as the foundation, as a continual player, let me frame the question to you, is how does it change from week to week for you, adjusting to what's happening above you, as it were?
Well, not only above me, but also
Below?
in my section.
Yes.
Although what I found is that I know all the keyboard players pretty well and their styles, and most of the bass players too. And I just find they follow me, which is amazing. But I find it like the absolute best of chamber music, because you're always altering what you're doing to match other people. At the same time, my voice, what I'm supposed to do, is let the upper voices think they're in charge, but keep them on track. So particularly when it comes to time, they want to take a lot of time in places, and I'm going to keep it going subtly. So I love that side of it, and if they're using either a little more vibrato or maybe a little more strength on each note, then maybe I should do a little bit more of that too. Or maybe, just maybe, I'll do the opposite and try to see if I can swing them a different way. And then again, we have a conductor. So if there's something that you don't like or that you think you can change, you might bring us all together a little bit better. So I love it.
Great. So, Sarah Darling, in my opening statement, I said that we subscribe to this philosophy that Bach is the domain of all musicians. As I look at you holding a baroque violin, how do you respond to that question?
I say, even early musicians? Thank you.
Indeed.
But I do say that, and I mean it to a certain extent, because Bach is so innately shared amongst sort of all of us, whether we're playing in bands or whether we're singing or whatever it is. Bach is so innate to all of us that that every new situation that you enter into with Bach is one where you do want to come in and sort of see what is the Bach culture in this place, and the Bach Kultur could be almost anything, which is just endlessly fascinating. Yeah. A fun other thing that, well, no, I'll stop there.
Please. Oh. Sarah, how do you respond to that as somebody, as I see you with two types of cellos right there, that sort of is on both sides?
Well, one of the things that I have to say I really appreciate from you is the fact that if I have to go directly to a Handel and Haydn concert and I show up with my Baroque cello for Emmanuel, you think that's just fine. And I really appreciate that. And I think that people welcome it. You know, I don't say you have to play it a certain way. I think that there are certain things that are way easier, I think, on the Baroque cello. Particularly some of the bowings that Bach puts forth, they're just fast things are so articulate and easy. At the same time, the strings might squawk, they might go out of tune. Sometimes playing it on a modern instrument makes it a whole lot easier too. So they have their places, and having done a lot of Baroque playing, I can get a sense of what I want to do, whether or not I'm playing a Baroque instrument.
I'm going to stay with the two Sarahs here for a moment. And specifically, you started on this question, but can you talk a little bit more about what you prefer, or what are the challenges of playing the same music on either of those cellos?
Well, I always feel like the instrument kind of dictates how I play. So is it all right if I do a little example?
Please.
So if I were to play the sarabande of the second suite, and hopefully this is still in tune, part of what dictates how I play is how I hold the instrument. So I don't have an end pin on this one. It's more straight up and down. It's not going to let me vibrate very much. The bow, which is convex instead of concave, is very good at being played on the down bow, not so good on an up bow. It's not very good at sustaining. So the beginning of the sarabande has a short note in it, and playing it on this cello, this is what I would do. But if I were to play that on my modern cello with my lovely sustaining bow, it makes me want to do something different. And that would be and I want to vibrate more, I want to hold the note out longer at the beginning of the second measure, and I don't want to do, that feels very heavy and awkward, but I can kind of get the same sound by cheating. So on this cello, I don't have to worry about whether it's going to squawk on certain notes because I press too hard. I've always felt like playing on Baroque cello taught me how to play this instrument, though, because this cello doesn't like to be pressed. If I play, it gets really ugly, but it loves to have the sound pulled to the side. And I didn't know that you could do that until I played gut strings and they wouldn't let me press. So I feel like playing Baroque cello taught me how to play my modern cello better. But sometimes I enjoy the fact that this thing stays in tune. And I can just change the tuning down here, and it's just less difficult to work with.
And Sarah, darling, you, in our recent concert, the Bach-Goldenberg Variations, you played modern violin.
That's true.
That's true. So talk to us about what your experience of playing Baroque violin, how that informs your approach to playing in a modern string ensemble, playing Baroque music.
Yeah. It really, the funny thing is that one should have sort of a very complex, very delicate answer to this question that's full of, great, pearls of wisdom from the masters. And of course, all of that, you can kind of squeeze all of that out if you want. But actually, it's a lot simpler than that for me. Generally speaking, it has to do with ease, and I would even go so far as to say laziness. So for me, the super, super fun thing about this instrument is that I can play a phrase, I don't have to do anything. So how does the Goldberg variations go? Seriously, how does it go? You know, if I want that to just go, the bow's just automatically going to do that. I don't have to do a darn thing because it's just zigzagging all the way toward this kind of nice light tip. And I mean, that suits my lazy self quite well. If I run and grab my modern viola bow, though, it won't quite work. But
Don't go too far.
Yeah, that's a good
You're
point.
fine.
All right, thank you for that. Sort of in the same way that Sarah Freiberg's been talking about. My gosh, remember that you're wired in. It's certainly possible, but if I want to get that lightness off of the string, I have to make my entire arm go up to make it happen. An exaggeration, for sure. But here the bow is just like, hey, you don't have to do anything. And so the fun thing about using this equipment is that it guides you towards a sort of a sublime laziness. But you keep the sound in your head. And then when you go back to the modern, you say, oh, I like that sound though, how can I? And then, you have to become sublimely the opposite of lazy in order to get that to happen. So I was working really hard in the Goldberg variations.
And we didn't give you a doubling fee. So, Heidi, you recently told us this example of a Handel example of somebody playing a modern instrument with a baroque bow. Can you tell our listeners about that and what it is that you gleaned from that experience and how you apply that to your own playing, or not?
Well, so this was a previous conversation that we had where I brought up a YouTube video that I stumbled across of a well-known violinist. Should I say? Probably not. Well-known violinist, modern player who, people pay a lot of money to hear play Brahms concerto with major symphonies and things like that. And he was playing a Handel sonata with a pianist in a very big concert hall, thousands of people probably, and was beautiful, with a lot of vibrato, sustaining like a dream. Like we grow up, modern players grow up learning how to play our scales so that the down bows and the up bows sound the same. This is the goal, right? Sustaining, you start up bow and can't tell that you're starting up bow.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is the early ideal of modern violin teaching. And this violinist, he's playing along, and I think, okay, this is a modern recording, obviously, okay. And then at the end of the first phrase, he gets here, the camera, closes up to us, and you see the tip of the bow, and it's a baroque bow. He's sustaining.
Mm-hmm.
He's sustaining. He's playing with modern practices. And playing like he always plays, basically, regardless of what kind of bow he's using.
Yeah.
So you kind of lead me to where I'm going with this, which is, and Sarah Darling and I were just touching on it before, that the equipment doesn't make the player. Mm-hmm. It influences you, mm-hmm. But the choices that we make ultimately are our individual voices and visions. Mm-hmm. And he illustrated that beautifully, where he played how he always plays, with a baroque bow. So to me, I know that I'm informed by the bow, and the challenges of the modern bow and the things that are easier on the modern bow also. But then there's also just that, I have a certain idea of things, as we all do, and we we follow where those lead us, those ideas. So, and that also leads me to something I've been thinking about in preparation for this is, I love these, you come across on YouTube a lot, these people who do a rendition of a piece that's not written for their instrument, and they take it on and create something really amazing. So, I mean, even, electric guitarists playing, arias from St. Matthew Passion.
Yes.
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 You know which one I'm talking about. It's incredible. And so it's, I think all music belongs to everyone, right? And that's part of what we're doing here. I mean, on a much smaller scale, which is that we all have a right to sort of explore and put forth our thoughts. So, and also I mean, if I can just say with Bach, that playing Bach sometimes feels it feels like it was written yesterday to me. So often. It feels like new music, and I'm really inspired by that. It's just so fresh, and it withstands so many different treatments too.
I'll say I taught at BU. I taught a mini course on the Bach cello suites, and of my students, there were 2 cellists, a bass player, a percussionist, a saxophonist, and a violist. And percussion and saxophone, they were great. But with both of them, finding where to breathe was kind of important. And we talked a lot about phrasing and rhetoric and how you would speak through your instrument. But I was totally convinced by all of them and how they played their instruments. Didn't matter that it wasn't written for their instruments.
So the question of, is it the player or the equipment, I find incredibly intriguing. And you talked about it. Sarah, can I give you a crack at that question and your opinion?
I mean, you're just going to make me tell the old Heifetz story, which I'm not sure if I'm going to get it quite right, but is it
Let's
Heifetz?
hear it.
I don't even know. I think it's Heifetz. So he plays this beautiful concert, and of course everybody's going wild, and they come up afterwards and say, oh, what is this wonderful instrument that you're playing on? Oh, your instrument, it sounds so fantastic. And he just goes, yeah.
He says, I don't hear anything.
Yes, he says, he uses his words.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I do think that we're talking about a sort of a delicate, what's this thing called? The thing where one thing affects the next, affects the next, affects the next. It's all made up of arrows. System dynamics, is that it? Anyway, so yes, I could love the sound of the baroque bow and get interested in doing that and sort of inform my own personal sort of feeling about phrasing. And then later I could, find some other wonderful thing from my experience playing guitar, which I don't play, and sort of add that to the mix. And then, there could be something else that comes in from singing or whatever it is. And all of these things, as I head out into any particular area to explore it, I kind of want to go out really with an open heart. If I'm gonna really play, 17th century violin music on a baroque bow, I'm gonna really try to go for it and sort of just let everything else take a back seat. But then when I come back to the center, then there's that question of okay, well, how do all of these different things, all my sort of collection of experiences, how do they talk to each other? What are the things there that connect? There's usually something that connects it all. And that's kind of a life's work, is figuring out what that is and how to use it.
It's interesting you say that, because to me, from my vantage point, when I'm standing up there conducting, one of the things that I'm always sort of awestruck by is, the people, not the instrument, the player, and the collection of years and years and years of experience that are brought to bear every time we get together, and the collaborative process that we have, and how we get from that first rehearsal, where the first reading of a Bach opening chorus or aria can be, you know, somewhat messy, and of all these different ideas that we do find a common ground, and we bring all these experiences to bear and find that one sweet spot where we can all make the same sound. With the time we have left, I just want to say something to our listeners. If you have questions for either of these three musicians, please type them in the chat box and our producer Brad will send them to me so I can share the questions and we can answer them as they come in. Can we just take a second to talk about the hardware, just briefly? I'll go to you first, Sarah. If you can just maybe tell us the differences between what makes that a Baroque violin for our listeners, and then Heidi, compare to yours, and then I think we might have some musical examples for the two of you to show how this works differently.
Sure. I'm just going to go out on a limb and say the thing that makes this a Baroque violin is a good 50% right here, maybe 60, 70%. To me, like the ability that the bow has to shape phrasing and to sort of be the breath of the instrument is the single most crucial thing. I love playing actually on my modern viola. I love playing a Baroque bow on my modern viola. The idea of playing a modern bow on a Baroque instrument is like, that's tough, that's tough. So that's thing number one. Thing number two, so not a lot of extra hardware here, no chin rest, kind of basic shoulder rest. That means, of course, that certain things like sustaining don't really come into the picture, but it also means that other things, like a sort of a flexible approach, can become kind of more, they can become simpler. And that's actually kind of lovely. Thing number three, gut strings. And on the one hand, you've got the squawking problem. But if you, during the time when that problem is not happening, you have sweetness. And you also have this crazy fast response. So those are things that the instrument likes to do. There are other things it doesn't like to do, but those are some things that kind of that make it what it is. Over to you.
Heidi.
So the differences, I mean, you kind of already told us about them, right? Modern violin, we have a chin rest, and I use a shoulder rest. Not all modern players do. I like it for the support. Steel strings.
Tchaikovsky violin concerto.
Yeah, so, projection, power, sustaining, staying in tune for long pieces of music, this kind of thing, right? Yeah. The bow is a different shape. Yeah. So, probably can't tell, but the frog is, this is the frog, is heavier and also has to be balanced by a heavier tip so that you can play to the end and keep the sound going. So part of the idea then behind this, I think of being able to, the bow is like air for a singer or for a wind player. And so, trying to change the bow and not have it be a breath. And the breath is only when I choose to put it in. So that's the thing that I think of as with the modern bow, allowing me to keep the sound and the phrase going until I decide to stop it.
Which is so perfect for so much of the music that is written specifically for that bow. I mean, if I were to, I could try, but it would be pretty funny. Even if I were to try to sustain, it's wonderful that your YouTube guy could do it. But even if I try right now to sustain and to vibrate, it's possible, but look at the cost. The cost is that my right shoulder is like up in the stratosphere. I'm holding onto the instrument for dear life. And whereas if you were to play that note, you wouldn't have to do any of that stuff. It would just happen.
So I think you guys have some musical examples for us. In fact, this weekend, our principal guest conductor, John Harbison, will be conducting Cantata 32. And Sarah and Heidi are both going to play excerpts from the bass aria with violin solo, the third movement. And the text is, "Hier in meine Vaterstätte," or "Here in my father's palace." And along with Michael Beatty, our principal keyboard player and artistic administrator, is here, and with Sarah Freiberg playing the continuo line. They're going to each play a bit of it, and we're going to compare and contrast.
Who's playing first?
Do we need to flip
Who's
the line?
first?
I can play.
Good. I got that cello.
There.
One second. Here, hey. Uh-oh. Ugh.
Just be glad we don't play the gamba.
Fascinating to hear the two of you play it and watch the differences. Can you tell me more about, either of you, about what this passage, especially as it relates to the double stops, the distance between from the bridge on your instruments and the bow, and what are the challenges of playing in a modern violin versus period violin, and what do you miss on either instrument?
Yeah, I can go a little bit. One of the things that was fun for me and that I sort of tried to lean into when I was looking at this is just the relationship between the slurs and the shape of my bow. So that happens kind of automatically. So does this. So that becomes like one of those like sublimely easy phrases in a way, but only if your purpose is to kind of dance it. If I wanted to sustain it and produce a totally different sort of effect, then that wouldn't work at all. So I guess I'm kind of already moving away from that choice into a different one. And then actually when I hear you play it, I think, oh wait, there's this whole other dimension that we could also explore. I'm gonna stop there and throw it over at you.
Well, I will say that playing this instrument is all that I know. So I don't have the comparison. I mean, I have played with a baroque bow, and I have found that it does. I can do other things.
Mm-hmm.
I love the ability with the modern instruments. I love the ability to look at the phrasing in, you know, from a perspective of, you know, where I am in time, I guess. And it's hard to explain, isn't it?
Could I jump in a little bit?
Please.
Having just played with both of you.
Yes.
So what I tend to think of as Baroque playing, and as what Sarah's doing, is sort of these little gems of small phrases, and you know, talking through the bow. The bow is the paintbrush. Whereas I feel like with Heidi, it's this overarching big phrase that's coming clear. So you're both looking at sort of different sides of the same thing, and it's really fun. This is very.
I appreciate that you say that, because that's what I'm going for.
Yeah. Well, it came across.
Yeah.
And so, you know, there are all these little things that we're exploring on the Baroque instruments, and this incredible bigger picture that I'm seeing with the modern instruments. And also, you get this amazing difference between loud and soft, and it's really clear, and it's really fun to figure out what you're doing in any moment. And it's much more subtle on the gut strings. You can't play as hard or as heavy. Yeah. And so it's all subtler, and as I say, it's more just in the variety in the bow, but yours has just this soaring quality, and both of them are just wonderful to play with. I feel really, you know, glad that I can do both.
I want to throw another thing in here that may or may not be fair, which is that we're both playing a line that will then be sung. And I feel as though there are also many ways of singing here in Meinem Vaterstädte, and I wonder if you actually would be interested in commenting on that at all.
Oh, well, this is, I think, often a perennial question, which perhaps you're driving at, I don't know, is when we have an instrumental ritornello in Bach that precedes the vocal entrance, which is the driving force for the phrasing? When Heidi plays this now, this weekend when David McFerrin sings it, is it incumbent upon him to phrase the way Heidi did, or is it incumbent upon Heidi to know what the text is and phrase the way she anticipates David will phrase? And I think that all of this music that Bach wrote is so text-driven. I mean, even in the way he bows it here. The opening line, I didn't plan on singing tonight, but I will briefly. He sings, Hier in meines Vaterstädte. So the way Bach bows it, he does with the vocal line, and then the third beat is separate. Likewise, he's got that all over one bow, which is all over one vowel. So I think these things are always in dialogue with one another. Now, that's the first 4 bars.
Yeah, I hear this piece goes on for a while.
And then, you know, it becomes this sort of fantasia, in a way, on what the vocal theme is. So I always think it's interesting when the instrumental ritornello sort of mirrors the phrasing that a singer will do, and then branches off from that into a different realm. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on that.
For me, it's a case-by-case basis, actually. I mean, because it doesn't always translate. You know, what works for the voice doesn't always work for the violin, for instance. And so that's something that I find is really fun, is you can't just take a rule, right, in Bach and put it according to, you know, say, oh, well, we're always going to do it this way, we're always going to do it the way, you know, because they don't always work the same. So I would like for the singer to do it the way I do it first. Just to say that out there. I mean, we can be informed by each other, but it's also, it brings up a question of then what we see on the page, how much to trust and believe that, right? Because if you look at the 4th bar, what you sang was the 3rd 8th note of that measure was a new
thing.
He bows the 4th bar differently.
He does it differently
for the violin than he does for the
vocal
voice.
line. Yeah. So what do we make of that? What do we do with it? You know, and it's always something to be worked out.
Yeah. fascinating. Even in measure 18, just before the bass sings it, the cello already is mirroring it in the answering.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Well, and this brings us all the way back if we're gonna kind of come all the way back. And thank goodness it's Bach, right? But I mean, but you could also be a composer, like any one of us could be a composer sitting here thinking to ourselves, oh, I'm gonna write a cantata. And then if any one of us was that composer, then we'd have to sort of wrestle with these questions of, oh gosh, how am I gonna write idiomatically for my chosen instrument and also honor the text in a way that makes sense and also make it sound good? This is terribly complicated.
Indeed. Sarah Freiberg, I have a question for you, as you said, with your two different cellos there. And as I look at Michael here, what role do you feel the sound of the organ, how does it inform the way you approach playing either instrument?
That's an interesting one. How long he holds his notes is going to tell me how long to play. He's sort of guiding me. It's particularly in secco recits. I got to do whatever he does. But also, if he plays something really short, I have to think about, should I do that too? So I tend to be shorter on this instrument than I do where I can sustain more. But it's also dependent on this space, where I tend to have to play 10 times shorter than I want to, and it still sounds too long. So, I mean, that's easy. It's easier to articulate with a Baroque bow, and I don't get yelled at for that. But otherwise, on my modern cello, I'm almost always too long, particularly in fast passages.
Of course.
So, but I try to meld my sound into that of the organ.
Sarah, darling, I think you talked about something being sublimely easy.
Oh yeah.
Was that the word? So,
I think so. Sublimely lazy, maybe even.
Sublimely lazy, perhaps even. I'm getting questions here sent in to me. Somebody wrote, with Bach, I often feel that Bach pushes the limits of any instrument's technique. So letting what's easy is not always enough.
Definitely not enough. Definitely not enough. But nonetheless, an interesting place to start from, insofar as you want to sort of keep your instruments at full capacity. And really that means, if there are places where you can find ease, relaxing into those so that you can just do pedal to the metal for the hard stuff. I think it's not a contradiction at all. So I'm just gonna go with that for now.
The other question, all three of you would be great. How does the instrument's capabilities affect the music that was written for them?
Oh. Right now, I once Robert Levin did this wonderful demonstration that I remember, and I think it was Beethoven piano concertos, and it had to do with kind of slamming up against the edge of the instrument, and the pianos kept getting built larger and larger and larger, and so each piano concerto went up a little bit higher, and a little bit higher, and it was phenomenal to see the instrument just kind of going, and then Beethoven sort of filling up the space as quickly as he could. There are lots of ways in which instruments sort of seize whatever new ground they're given. What else is on people's minds?
Well, I would say, it's really interesting to see how the bows changed over time along with the compositions. So that, as you get towards Beethoven, the bow has changed quite a bit by Mozart's time. Mozart wanted the bow to bounce more than the Baroque bow would, and the bow was doing that. And so I think there's influencing going on between composer and players and makers all the time. But I think sometimes we may make things harder than we need to. Like what I think of is like the sixth Bach cello suite. is impossibly hard if you don't have 5 strings. But Bach wrote it for 5 strings. And almost all cellists play it on 4 strings because it's a pain to learn a different instrument and to carry 2 of them around. And I gotta say, there's one piece that I'm playing this week that just one movement that's for piccolo cello, 5-string cello. And I am really struggling for those 3 measures that are up higher than I normally have to go in Bach. Yeah, exactly, at the speed that we're supposed to go. So we have to make sure we're doing what he asked for. I guess that's part of it. But you know, he also, I think he writes beautifully for each instrument. Like the cello suites, for example, they're just amazing, particularly in terms of sonority, how he knows what strings are going to ring and resonate and how to get a sense of harmony with that. But at the same time, he might not care how hard it is to play in certain keys and just throw that at you. So, yeah.
Well, let me let you, Heidi, take that question.
Well, I was going to sort of come at it from the other side a little bit, which is, I think the challenge is great, you know, and there's something about striving for it even if we don't, the meaning of striving for it even if we don't necessarily get there. But also thinking about how over time, I mean, it's true for all the instruments, but just to speak for the violin, you know, at every benchmark, composers were writing the most difficult music, and violinists were saying it's unplayable. And then 20, 30 years later, it's harder, and people are doing it, you know. And Sibelius Concerto, the person it was written for, I mean, he turned it down. He said it's unplayable. And now, you know, everybody in college has to play it. So.
And in 20 years, it'll be everybody in preschool.
Yeah.
Or something, at least high school.
I hope not.
And you know, the one funny time, kind of in history, let's say, where what you're saying I think applies less for the violin is, weirdly enough, during like the first century of the violin's life, because most of the people who were writing for it at that time were all violinists. They were all like, oh, this is great. Oh my gosh, look at this fun thing that we can do with it. And so that's kind of totally different when the composer is the performer, then you get like this crazy synergy. And often the instrument does get pushed there too, but in a different way.
Right.
And I mean, even going through to somebody like Paganini, like you can sort of see, well, I'm going to go there. The sublime not the sublime laziness, but sublime ease, because his fingers know where to go somehow.
Right.
So you know it's possible.
The perfection of it for the instrument.
Yeah.
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 Well, this has been fascinating. If there are any other questions people want to send in, that's great. One of the things that I've always been struck by Bach is how resilient he is, and what I mean by that is it holds up to any instrument, any interpretation, and the idea that Bach is the domain of all of us. I think if there's any composer that is more resilient to any interpretation than any other composer I know of, it's Bach, and it comes out at the other end still something that is meaningful and beautiful and has intent. And I think that's one of the great things we do here at Emmanuel. So thank you three very much. Thank you, Michael. Great conversation that I hope will continue, and I want to say to our viewers, please join us for the next event, which is Thursday evening. Tenor Frank Kelly and the Reverend Pamela Wernz will have a discussion about tension and discomfort in the St. John Passion. And then if you want to hear Heidi play that beautiful violin aria, there will be an open rehearsal on Saturday morning at 11 a.m. and then the performance on Sunday. So thank you all. Tune into more Bach Institute events and have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan.
Yeah.